It is draft day in the National Football League. The 2025 NFL Draft begins tonight in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Opening night, opening round. And we will get you set with everything you need to know live right here on this Thursday on the early line. We'll show you where the markets have moved. We will talk about if the odds are solidifying the picture for tonight's round number one, all of the trends you must know, and of course, some winning wagers where value might still be available in those draft markets on the FanDuel Sportsbook. DRS, draft day has come here in 2025.
It has. I got to tell, like, everybody has memories of, like, their draft night, which I had early spring 2000. Family was gathered around. We were watching the draft, and the phone never rang for me, man. It just didn't ring. So I realized at that moment my football career was officially over. But so many players tonight will not have that memory. That phone will ring. They'll be off to a new city. Millionaires minted and made, and it's a big night. And also, the bad football teams out there who struggled last year, their fan base is like, man, this is such a boring thing that we had. You get to fulfill that prophecy of hope for your future, whether it's a dominant defensive end, an unbelievable wide receiver cornerback combination, a quarterback that can light your franchise up for the first time since Steve Air McNair and maybe get you to a Super Bowl. So those teams that struggled last year and the fan bases didn't have a lot of fun tonight is your fun tonight, and we'll see what happens.
It's a great point, DRS, and it is not hyperbole to say that the future of the National Football League will be shaped forever tonight by the correct decisions or by those poor mistakes in the draft order as well. Your franchise's future could be altered on this Thursday night in Green Bay, Wisconsin, in the shadows of Lambeau Field in Titletown. And DRS, one of the stories of the very start of this 2025 NFL Draft is the lack of movement in that draft order. For the first time in the common draft era that dates all the way back to 1967, every single NFL franchise holds its original first-round selection on draft day. Heck, not even draft day, at the start of the league year, which comes each and every year on the calendar in the middle of March. So, as we're talking about every single NFL franchise, let's put up the draft order that we have for tonight's first round. There you see it, DRS, 1 through 32. All 32 teams have that original first-round pick. There has not been a trade either from years previous or during this specific draft cycle at the end of the 2024 NFL season, getting ready for 2025 and beyond.
Exactly. Love to see the draft board up there, all the logos there. And if you're just watching this network, this show this morning, and have no idea what American football is, you might ask yourself a question here, Ben. And that question would be, is like, how do you get the draft order? And why are the Eagles picking 32nd? Why? They're the best football team in the world, which is the way it's supposed to be. And I hope when the Eagles select 32nd, and whenever it's the second round or the third round or the fourth round, when you get to bring up players from your past to announce it, they understand the task at hand, like we used to see with David Akers telling the Dallas Cowboys fans, yes, the reigning Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. Oh, it's a good night to draft 32nd. Why? Because the best football team in the NFL resides in Philadelphia.
When you draft 32nd, it means you won a Lombardi trophy. It means that Donnie Rightside will have a second replica Lombardi, maybe in that set, as we get ready for a Friday or a Monday on the early line. Let's dive even deeper, DRS, examining the top 10, because we'll look at the odds in just a moment. We have draft odds for every single overall pick, 1 through 10. Here are the teams and where they stand. Might we see movement on draft day? Probably unlikely. As the draft begins, now that is a very, very different story. DRS, during the draft, we have averaged 5.6 trades in every single draft since 2020. The last 5 during the actual draft. After the first team goes on the clock, we have averaged 5.6 trades. We have seen a trade and a half on average, up or within the top 10 in every single draft since 2011. It's all quiet now on that draft front in Green Bay, but that could very well change in just about 12 hours or so.
It can. And also, like, we need that intrigue. That's what makes draft night fun. Like, you have unbelievable superstar front end talent that we expect to go in the top 5. And that's if we'll talk about Ashton Genty gets the 5, who's now the favorite to be drafted 5th overall. By what team? Maybe it's Jacksonville. Maybe somebody trades up. But you want to set this night up where somebody has their hand in the bag right off the bat. And it's like, doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, we have a trade. Number 2, yep. Cleveland moves out. Oh, my goodness. That would set the night up so well. And even if we get 1, 2, 3 in the same order we predicted here, isn't 4 still that wild card right there with the Patriots? If they move out and trade, yep. Who's it going to be? Did somebody move in there to take Shedeur? Did somebody move up to take Ashton Genty because they can't wait till 5 because Jacksonville's going to be there? Or does Jacksonville go from 5 to 4 because they know somebody's going to jump them from Ashton Genty? Just give us that explosion to start the draft. Because the one thing we do love is throughout all these rounds, veteran players will be moved for draft picks, which is always fun to talk about. And sometimes midway through the first round, really good football players get traded for a first-round pick. We don't know who that's going to be, but the expectations are there. But just give us, Ben, one of those highlights in the top 5 where somebody moves up and we're not technically sure who it's actually for. That's what we need tonight.
Absolutely so. DRS 1 through 3 feels rather solidified. The Titans, Browns, Giants in that order. The Patriots at 4, maybe. 5, the Jacksonville Jaguars have been called the wild card of this opening round and certainly in the top 5. Following Jacksonville, the Raiders select 6th, Jets 7th, Panthers 8th, the Saints at 9, and the Chicago Bears round out the top 10. DRS, we'll talk about 6 through 10 in just a moment. But 1 through 5, as of this draft morning, if the odds makers are this confident, are we going to see any surprises in those first 5 picks? Cam Ward on the day of the draft. It's all but a matter of time until we get official confirmation that Cam Ward is going first overall. A minus 50,000 favorite. And those odds are as up to date as you can be, DRS, but they're even stronger. Travis Hunter, now minus 2,000. Abdul Carter, now minus 2,000 to go 2nd and 3rd, respectively. Will Campbell, minus 600 as the 4th overall pick. And Ashton Genty is now a minus 230 favorite to go 5th overall. Those odds and the rest and the other big storylines for draft day next. Live right here, it is NFL Draft Day on the early line on Sports Grid. What?
Yeah.
What?
I'm getting into the draft right now. Like, just talking about it, getting the vibes going. We've been talking for months about the same things. We just need some mayhem. We just need some top mayhem in this draft to set it off. Like, Ben, what happens if you get word? Later tonight, you're setting up, you're in the studio, maybe having a pregame meal, and you get word from one of our insiders at the Sports Grid Network that the number 1 pick is officially now for sale. Like, can't we have something like that would just break brains and shatter expectations? Why can't we have this?
I don't know if we'll have that, DRS, but I do think we will see some movement, maybe in the top 5 and maybe even in the top 10. 24 consecutive NFL drafts, basically the entirety of this millennium, where we have seen a team trade within or into the top 15, at least on draft night or even before, but we're not expecting anything to happen prior to 8 p.m. Eastern time tonight in Green Bay. If they are trading into the top 5, top 10, who might that prospect be they are targeting? DRS, as the odds makers have shown, we have basically figured out the top 5. Cam Ward, minus 50,000 to go 1st overall. Travis Hunter, minus 2,000 now to go 2nd. Abdul Carter, minus 2,000 now to go 3rd. Will Campbell, minus 600 as that favorite to go 4th. In the big news yesterday, really in the last 24 to 36 hours, the Jacksonville Jaguars seem more infatuated with the running back Ashton Genty. Now a minus 230 favorite to be that 5th overall pick. Donnie, is that exactly what the top 5 of the draft order is going to look like? Or might there be a stunning surprise in just 12 hours?
There has to, the surprise, I don't think, is coming from the top 3. Now, let's play it out how it should work. Like, Cam Ward minus 50,000, we've known for a long time. That's Tennessee's guys. They made that known. That's why the number is there. And I don't think anybody's trading up to get him. It's going to be too expensive, and maybe other teams aren't sold as much as the Tennessee Titans. Number 2 is Travis Hunter. I don't think that's going to change now, and rightfully so. A couple weeks ago, I thought that pick should have been Abdul Carter, and maybe somebody trades up to get him. I don't think anybody's trading up and using huge draft capital, should say, to get Travis Hunter. I think he stays there. But the intriguing position to me really is the Giants and Abdul Carter at number 3. Other teams around the NFL might seem like it could be a bargain to go up and get him, and how much are the Giants absolutely in love? And the reason I say this, I think he's the best player in the draft. You might say, Donnie, what do you mean? Why wouldn't the Giants be in love with what you say is the best player in the draft? It's at a position that's not of need for the Giants when there's quarterbacks on the board, which means, do I trade out, get extra draft capital, still get a great player in the middle of the first round, still have enough capital to trade back into the first round with why I moved back from 3, where it doesn't really cost us anything? I think the Giants could be the true wild card at number 3. If they draft Abdul Carter, it's a great pick because he's a great player. But I do think there's the maneuverability where it's like, we technically don't need him, but we'll take him. But if somebody gives us a pretty good number at 3 to slide back a couple spots, recoup a first-round draft pick, and get the guy that we really need, I think that might make some sense there, Ben.
Yeah, it really could, DRS. Again, for these teams that maybe don't have the most optimistic outlook for the upcoming NFL season, and you've got a lot of roster spots that need attention, if somebody wants to move up the draft board, then you could fill out and get a ton more draft capital if you decide to move back. But with that being said, DRS, oftentimes the move up is for a quarterback or at least an offensive player. In fact, on draft night in the last 15 years, the first move up the draft order, whether that be by a spot or a couple on draft night, 12 of the 15 times it has been for an offensive player, namely a quarterback. But in 2023, we saw the first move up the draft board to 3rd overall, the Texans selecting Will Anderson Jr. If the top 5 feels rather solidified, how about 6 through 10? We have no minus money favorites, and we have seen a lot of movement, both in prices and players, DRS, overnight. Kelvin Banks Jr., the offensive lineman out of Texas, now the favorite to go 6th overall to the Las Vegas Raiders. At the time of us filling out this show last night, Armand Membu, the offensive tackle out of Missouri, was a minus money favorite to go 6th. He is now the favorite to go 7th. Mason Graham, incredibly intriguing. The favorite to go 8th overall, the interior D lineman from Michigan at a plus 170 price. Mykel Williams, edge rusher out of Georgia, plus 260. And Tyler Warren, DRS, the Mackey Award winner from Penn State, plus 300 as the favorite to go 10th to the Bears.
And I'm telling you, a lot of people just saw that graphic and are saying who he played for at this point, and myself included. I'm telling you right now, if we didn't talk about these names for about a week or two, I wouldn't know any of these players, who they played for, what position they're in. That's not a good look.
Hour number 2, NFL draft discussion next. It is NFL Draft Day here on this Thursday as we welcome you to hour number 2 live right here on the early line. He is Donnie Rightside. I am Ben Stevens. In this second hour, your Draft Day primer continues here on TEL. Later in this second hour, Mark Zinno will join us for his thoughts on the NFL Draft. We'll run a draft pick 6. We'll talk some NBA playoff previews, all of that and plenty more here on the early line. DRS is even fired up for the NFL Draft. That's how you know it's going to be a good one in 2025.
Absolutely. Just went over to the FanDuel Sportsbook and said, what happens if I place $5 down on Cam Ward to be the number 1 overall pick, Ben? The payout, $5.01. There you go. So if you want to be a winner out there, you cash that ticket in, you show all of your friends, you're trying to impress somebody in your life here. Look, I had this pick. Here's my winning ticket right now. Just put the little, blotches over how much you paid for it and be like, you know what? I'm a genius. I knew this all along. That's how you do it.
Winning is winning. Investment is investment. If it leads to you being in the black, that's all you can ask. So DRS, here on this NFL Draft Day, the top 5 feels rather solidified from the odds makers' perspective. Cam Ward, minus 50,000, a substantial favorite to go 1st overall. Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter, now live on the FanDuel Sportsbook, minus 2,000 to go 2nd and 3rd, respectively. Will Campbell, minus 600 favorite to go 4th. Ashton Genty, the big mover in the last 24 hours or so, now a minus money favorite at minus 230. To be that 5th overall pick. 6 through 10, much more up in the air. Kelvin Banks, the O-lineman out of Texas, plus 160. Favorite to go to the Raiders at 6th overall. Armand Membu, plus 195. The offensive tackle out of Mizzou, the favorite to go 7th. Mason Graham, plus 170 to go 8th. Micah Williams, the edge rusher out of Georgia, plus 260 to go ninth. And Tyler Warren at a 3-1 price, the Mackey Award winner and the tight end from Penn State, the ever so slight favorite at a plus 300 number to go 10th overall to Chicago. DRS, none of those favorites are minus money, however, to go 6 through 10, which means that could be a spot to see some movement in the draft order after all.
Yeah, and we'll see who wants to climb up or maybe trade out of those spots if they don't have true first-round grades or what they think is going to be a decision-making player for their team. But I do think it's interesting that 10 spot with Warren, if he does wind up and we don't get any trades in the top 10 to the Chicago Bears to pair up with Cole Kmet, I think that would be absolutely sensational and add another weapon here, that double tight end set. You got wide receivers, you got running backs, you got the quarterback of the future. So I do think the Bears are in a pretty good position to have that. But it is interesting we're 6 to 10, and I want to say household names because they're really good football players, but I do think you get a lot of movement in that spot because what we've been hearing is that teams in the top 10 looking to trade out of the top 10, but not a lot of takers because, again, we don't know how front-loaded this draft is outside of, let's just say, the top 3 to 4 picks right now, which will add some intrigue as we get there. I would be shocked if we go through the top 10 and there's not one move made and everybody just sticks to their position as they wanted it here. That would certainly be shocking. But also, here's what I need. Like late in the day, where's the Adam Schlechter tweets out here that get people fired up as a massive players on the move? Because as Ben was pointed out, and rightfully so, like these numbers typically it's like, okay, they're going to move a couple weeks ago. They'll move a few days before the draft, maybe incrementally, a day and a half before. Massive line movement already this morning, like the number 2 and the number 3 pick getting solidified right now. I wonder if we get a point where the FanDuel Sportsbook, Ben, is taking off the board because minus 50,000 really is off the board. I don't know anybody's like, hey, let me pony up $50,000 to make like $100 back, or even if the FanDuel Sportsbook would take that here. So essentially those numbers are there. I just wonder where Hunter and Abdul Carter finish 1, 2, and 3, because I still think that Abdul Carter at minus 2,000, he is the best player, but I don't know if the Giants draft him at 3. That might be the only intrigue for me so far that legitimately could happen.
Yeah, for me, DRS, I do think the top 5 looks like that. The small caveat you must always present when it comes to betting NFL draft markets, if Abdul Carter goes 3rd, but the Giants trade out to the New Orleans Saints, and the Saints select Abdul Carter 3rd, you still cash that ticket. It is not Abdul Carter going 3rd overall to the New York Giants. Just Abdul Carter hearing his name called 3rd earliest tonight in Green Bay. Of course, one of the big storylines, Donnie, for this NFL draft cycle, and especially here during draft week in the last 48 hours, where will Shedeur Sanders go? His stock on a slide. As we get ready for this draft today, Shedeur Sanders to be a first-round pick, still minus 370. But, Donnie, that number wasn't even on the board on Monday because he was a minus money price to go top 10 at minus 210. That number now hefty plus money, as is his price to go top 5. And maybe most dramatically, that over-under position prop is 21.5. Why is that significant? Because which NFL franchise drafts 21st overall? The Pittsburgh Steelers, who are now a minus 135 favorite to be the team to select Shedeur Sanders.
And here's the interesting part, because we had Joe Lisi on yesterday talking about this, and I think he's right on this. I don't think if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers and you've identified Shedeur Sanders as your guy, and then the betting public goes, well, he's probably not going to make it past the Steelers. Don't you think every other football team that actually looks at Shedeur Sanders and wants to trade up from knows they can't wait where the Pittsburgh Steelers are? And the Steelers know that. Like, understand this. Part of the key moving and shaking, which Howie Roseman of the Eagles does very well, he's traded up the past couple of years to get teams ahead of teams he knows wants to take a certain player. You have to expend draft capital because they also know that you want that player. So I would be astounded. Like, if he winds up in Pittsburgh, which I think is a pretty good look for the Steelers, and finally you get what you think is going to be your franchise guy, Ben, there's no way they can wait because everybody is under the same assumption that he won't make it past the Steelers. So if you want Shedeur Sanders, you got to get ahead of the Steelers. And the Steelers understand that everybody's trying to do that, where they might have to jump up 1 or 2 spots and pay a little bit extra of a premium to move up just to make sure they get the guy they want. So I look at that 21.5 and I say, I don't know if that number is correct because, again, I would be very surprised the way the NFL works is they just waited. Everybody knew they probably wanted him, and they got him at that draft spot.
Yeah, I wonder as well, DRS. I've shared this a few times. When this when this odd market came out for the team to draft Shedeur Sanders, the Pittsburgh Steelers had a 17-1 price. A couple of weekends ago when we were doing Final Four coverage for Sports Grid's Bracket Central, I could not wait to get over to the Garden State where I could actually bet the NFL draft. At that time, the Steelers were a 9-1 price to draft Shedeur Sanders. Still made a ton of sense to me. That's where I bet it. I am very much hoping that minus money price is correct. But I also thought, DRS, it would be Pittsburgh having to move up from 21st overall, maybe past New Orleans at number 9, into the top 10 to go get their quarterback of the very hopeful future in the Steel City. Now I'm not so sure, because also as we have laid out, the teams in desperate need of a quarterback either have given us zero indication they are going after a quarterback in the draft, or they have already made their moves this offseason to at least solidify the quarterback room for 2025, looking at you, the Browns, and the Giants, and perhaps the Raiders. I do think Shedeur Sanders goes 21st overall here on draft day to Pittsburgh. Donnie, we'll have so much more time to discuss the quarterbacks, but the over-under draft prop for QBs is 2.5, and the over has the heavy juice at minus 167. If I think there is a plus money price that might make some sense tonight, it could be the under of 2.5 at plus 120. And it really all depends on what happens to Jackson Dart later in the opening round. We will discuss later. There is so much to get to here in our draft coverage. It is time to win with Zinn, but for a very special Thursday, live right here on the early line, it is draft day. Mark Zinno gets you ready and sets the stage for the stage we will see tonight in Green Bay for the opening night, the opening round of the 2025 NFL Draft. Mark Zinno, as always, we appreciate the time. Thanks for being here on this Thursday on TEL.
Gentlemen, no better place to be, no better day to be here than the NFL Draft. I am excited.
I know you are, Mark, and that warms my heart. Let's look at the draft order overall. All 32 NFL franchises, as we get ready for the draft on draft day, still maintain their original first-round pick. Of course, you know, that is history. The first time it has ever happened in the common draft era around the National Football League dating back to 1967. It is one of the main themes and narratives entering the 2025 NFL Draft. But in your mind, is it the biggest? What is the biggest storyline for Mark Zinno getting ready for draft night?
Well, it's obviously where the quarterbacks are going to go. I mean, we've seen a shuffling of the deck here as of late in all this Jackson Dart love coming in and Shedeur Sanders reportedly falling way late in the first round, even out of the first round. You know, and with everybody here, you have to try to figure out what's white noise and what is just shadow games and what's actual reality. You know, it's interesting because, again, when I hear all the talk about Jackson Dart, oh, here's his record against Georgia, here's his record against Alabama and everything else, you know, like I remember us doing the same thing to Bo Nix last year. Like we forgot how much people chided Bo Nix and didn't think he was going to be all that in the NFL. And with the right coach, turned out to be a pretty decent quarterback in year one. What does that mean for the rest of his future? Not 100% sure, but looks like he can play over the course of 17 games and leading his team to the playoffs. So you have to take a lot of this stuff with a grain of salt here. I will say this much. You know, after we did the show last week, I got on my little sports book there, and I decided to place a wager on Shedeur Sanders' draft position at under 8.5. And it was plus 190 at that time. Yeah, okay, so you made that face. Well, lo and behold, what happened 48 hours ago? Adam Schefter got his happy butt on TV and decided to tell everybody that, oh, Shedeur Sanders might fall down to 21 here at the Steelers. And, well, lo and behold, what happened? The entire market moved. So I went back to look at my sports book and saw now Shedeur Sanders at under 8.5 was at plus 650. So I'm curious, what would you guys have done? Because I'll tell you what I did.
Bought back in. Did you buy back in?
Go ahead.
Bingo. Doubled right down on Shedeur Sanders at under 8.5 at plus 650 because I figured, why not? I mean, to me, it was if I took a flyer on something that felt improbable at plus 190, why wouldn't I do it again at plus 160? If I was willing to lose a shekel once, I'm willing to lose it twice at a much bigger number. So, my hope here is now at this point in time for my wallet, the Giants are dumb enough to take Shedeur Sanders at 3.
Two wrongs
I
always
guess,
make a right, Mark Zeno. I'm with you on that. I love it.
DRS, I love it. Thank you.
Yes, I'm with you.
You guys can really get behind that.
We
I
do.
can understand the bravado behind it. I don't think it's the best betting advice for our viewership here on the Sports Grid Network, but DRS, fire away.
DRS, love you.
Yeah, but I mean, we're the same way. I mean, like in all parts of my life, double down, never admit to the error, keep moving. Eventually, the other person will give way, and you win that organization. Yeah, see that? There you go. But getting back to the top 10 here, if we look at the top three, we want excitement tonight, Mark. We really do. But it doesn't look like, let's just say, the Titans are going to trade pick number 1. So my question to you is, if we look 2 through 10, give me a spot where you think a trade-up could happen, but more importantly, which team do you believe is going to make a trade in or out of the top 10 if you see one coming tonight?
You know, I kind of believe that the Giants, for Joe Shane and Brian Daboll, who knows how much job security they really have, like, unless Abdul Carter is there, right? Like, there's a part of me that believes that, like, these guys don't want the pressure of drafting 3rd overall and screwing it up. The idea that they might take, Travis Hunter and it not work out, or they take Abdul Carter and it not work out, or they take Shedeur Sanders and it not work out. They know they're all dead on arrival if that happens. Then why not get the heck out of that spot, trade back and try to acquire more and go, we'll just play the safe thing when something falls to us at 15, 18, 20, whatever it may be, to somebody who wants to come up and get them. So I think they are a real linchpin here in the draft, what happens with the Giants at 3. And then, again, I think that there's a lot of volatility here with the Saints at 9. From all accounts that I've read, they're not taking a quarterback. They don't feel like there's one valuable there, that Cam Ward is the only one they got a first-round grade on. They need a ton of things. They need a lot of cheap talent because they're still struggling with cap issues that they may want to get out of there at 9. So I think we'll see 1 or 2 trades here in the top 10 before it's all said and done tonight.
Since 2011, when the draft has begun, of course, we have not seen a trade in the draft order prior to the beginning of the 2025 NFL draft. But after the Tennessee Titans go on the clock and the draft officially starts tonight, since 2011, we have averaged a trade and a half into or within the top 10 in NFL drafts. Zeno, right now, though, the odds makers are almost solidifying what the top 5 of the draft order is going to look like tonight. Cam Ward now a minus 50,000 favorite to go first overall. Both Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter now minus 2,000 to go second and third. Will Campbell a minus 600 favorite to go fourth overall. In the big move in the top 5 has been Ashton Genty, now a minus 250 price to be that 5th overall pick. Zeno, when we get through the top 5 of the NFL draft in, just a little bit shy of 12 hours tonight in Green Bay, is that exactly what the draft order is going to look like in the top 5?
No, because I still think Genty is going to go 4, and I think the Patriots are another team that actually could trade out. They have a ton of needs, and Mike Vrabel has always been as smart as a coach as he has been as a sort of front office executive in knowing how to rebuild a roster and knowing that he has a bunch of needs. I don't think he'd mind trading back to a team that wants to move up and go get Ashton Genty because they believe as the best running back in this draft, he could ultimately be a playmaker and a game changer for some offense here going forward. I kind of still would be surprised. That's the one guy I think that we're starting to hear a lot of noise on in Ashton Genty that's actually true, that after the top 3 go of Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, and Abdul Carter, if they go to those 3 teams, but at least they would go in that order, that Genty would be the next guy off the board because it's just too much value to pass up for a player of his stature that can really change an offense.
We take a look at that 6 to 10 range here, which again is up in the air. The top 5 should be a lot of fun tonight. And there is intrigue at 4 and 5 if players stay there, or should I say if teams stay there, trade in or trade out, what players end up getting picked there. But from 6 to 10, is there a move or a shaker on your board, Mark, that you really like there, or maybe a surprise that you might see between those draft picks?
Yeah, I think Marcus Golden from Texas may be the guy who shoots up the draft board as far as the top wide receiver off the board. I know Ted McMillan has been getting all the love, but I think he's a guy that's actually going to be the first wide receiver taken off the board, and it wouldn't surprise me if it happened inside the top 10. I would also tell you, I think that Tyler Warren falls outside the top 10. Look, we learned from the Kyle Pitts experiment, you don't take tight ends that high. You just don't. There's not a value there. Even Brock Bowers went at 11, right? So I know 10 is only one spot away, but it just feels like GMs have learned that we're never going to get the value of a top 10 pick out of a tight end. And so I think Lauren may end up falling back a little bit.
So, of course, Mark Zinno being the Mark that he is, I think he was referring to Matthew Golden, the wide receiver out of Texas via Houston. But Mark is always first and foremost in Zinno's mind. Donnie doesn't. Donnie, where did Mason Graham go to college?
Yeah, see, that's cheating because we brought him up on the show, Michigan. But there's a couple. I wish we would have played this game like 2 weeks ago. It would have been pretty funny to watch these players go out. Like Ashton Genty. Man, where did he go again? You know what I mean?
Yeah, you knew that one. You were battling with Boise State fans in September about Ashton Genty's usage, so you could know that he played for the Broncos. If Ashton Genty goes in the top 10 tonight, especially in 5th or 4th or 6th overall, it will be the highest a Boise State player has ever been selected in NFL draft history. Zinno said his top storyline was the number of quarterbacks that we see in round number 1 tonight. And he is still holding on hope for the under 8.5. Can't even say it out loud. 8.5 for Shedeur Sanders. We talk QBs next. The quarterback position, each and every year for the NFL draft, is always one of the main narratives to follow throughout the entirety of the draft cycle and now on draft night. And of course, the one individual who probably will move the market one way or the other the most, that would be Colorado's QB in Shedeur Sanders. Now, Mark Zinno has told you he has doubled down on what I would consider a bad bet of under 8.5 and a couple of plus money prices on Shedeur Sanders' draft position prop. As of this draft day on the FanDuel Sportsbook, that number is 21.5. Convenient, if you ask me, because which franchise drafts 21st overall? The Pittsburgh Steelers, who are now a minus 135 favorite to be the team to draft Shedeur Sanders. All of that information, Mark, right back to you. Where do you think Shedeur Sanders gets picked in the 2025 NFL Draft?
Well, look, even if you believe that the Pittsburgh Steelers are eyeing up Shedeur Sanders, you still have to take the under 21.5 because you got to move in front of them to go get him, right? Like, unless the Steelers are willing to trade out at 21, which means they never wanted him to begin with, right? Like, you have to jump in front of Pittsburgh. I don't see a reason to play. If the only other bet to take Shedeur Sanders is to fall out of the first round altogether, right? Like, there's no reason I think you take over. Sure, could somebody trade back in? But at that point in time, you know, again, I mean, are you giving away for a team to trade out at 27, 28? They're going to want at least a second round pick next year. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're going to want a lot to move into that spot there, and it might not be worth it to teams to give it away when they know none of those teams are going to take Shedeur Sanders, period. So you can let him fall. So I think in general here, the philosophy on Shedeur Sanders and taking him is that if he gets outside the top 10, then probably there's a solid chance he might fall out of the first round altogether because, you know, again, I think that there's enough lust for quarterbacks in this league. And what did we say in the break, guys? With Shedeur, you're drafting two things, right? You're drafting his potential because I think he's got the biggest and the highest upside of any quarterback in this draft. I think that's kind of what the feeling is, that with the right coaching at the next level and everything else, he can ascend to a level that other guys can't get to. And quarterbacks are always overdrafted. Like, if he gets past the Giants, then, you know, I don't know that somebody doesn't move back into top 10 to get him. If they don't do that, then you know, the fall could come right out of the first round altogether. I just have a hard time believing that he would pass 21 and still stay in the first round.
If we look at Shedeur Sanders, Mark, right, coming into the season, the preseason favorite to be the number 1 overall pick in the draft. And granted, if you're a first rounder or second rounder, you're still drafting your quality football player. But why might we see the drop on Shedeur Sanders? Let's just say he doesn't go to Pittsburgh at 21 and he lasts to 27, 28, 29 or into the second round. What was shown on tape and or just the player coming to a new city where he would drop out of the first round? Because I know your point is valid and it's right. Quarterbacks are overdrafted every year. This kid's a talent. Why would he not go in the first round?
Right, and that's the point. Like, is there somebody out there who looked at Jackson Dart's tape and looked at Shedeur Sanders and can clearly unequivocally say Jackson Dart is a better quarterback? The idea that Jackson Dart would go in the first round and Shedeur wouldn't, to me, seems flawed. Either they both in the first round or they both fall out of the first round. When you look at Shedeur, again, I think you see a really high ceiling. I think you see a guy who can do a lot of different things on the football field that many other quarterbacks can't. And that's kind of, and outside of the name that you're drafting in Sanders and it being Deion's kid, and Deion is right. If his last name was Smith, we would be having a whole different conversation around him. But because he's related, it's Deion Sanders' son. There's absolute truth to the amount of smoke that is around his name throughout this entire draft process.
For sure. You could also argue the opposite of that equation. If his name was Smith, would he be following Deion to the level that he did at the FBS campaign? I'm not entirely sure. I think it works in both ways. With notoriety and attention, there is going to be naysayers and a ton of focus on what you do. I think Shedeur Sanders is a very, very talented quarterback. Had a 74% completion percentage last year in 2024 when he was a first-team All-American, when he was the Big 12 Player of the Year. That 74% completion percentage was the sixth best by an FBS quarterback in a single season in history. And yet there are certain things that NFL teams highlight, that he played in a very pass-heavy offense where he was the guy and he takes a lot of sacks. That might not translate to the next level. That is why I think we are seeing the stock slide. Any character questions, I think, are overblown. You want your quarterback to be confident. Shedeur Sanders, though, Mark, we still expect to be a first-round selection, minus 370. Cam Ward is the minus 50,000 favorite to go first overall. Jackson Dart still remains a favorite to be a first-round pick, and the over-under for the number of quarterbacks taken in round number 1 is 2.5, and the over has the hefty juice. At the end of 32 selections on night number 1, Mark Zeno, how many QBs go in the first round?
I think we get to three. I want to say 4. I mean, I really do. Like, is there a team out there that's drafting at the end of this draft that looks at Tyler Shough and goes, that kid's still a project, give me 2 or 3 years with him, and we can figure out what we have? But again, the idea that you're going to invest a first-round, pick into a guy that, doesn't have any long-term aspirations for you. It's one thing when you do it at 11 like the Chiefs did, and he was the heir apparent. No one at that late stage of the draft is going to be the heir apparent unless you get a trade back in. So I think we get 4. I genuinely think if we don't get – it's either 2 or 4, right? I don't think it lands on 3. I think, again, multiple guys fall out of the first round like Jackson Dart. Jalen Miller's not projected, but both of those guys do it, or none of them do it. So if you believe it's like I do, it's either 2 and it's Ward and Sanders, or it's 4 because Dart and Milroe or Dart and Shough both get in the first round.
Could the Atlanta Falcons look for another quarterback? The question always has to be asked, with what the Falcons draft strategy could be. You are there in Atlanta. You cover the Falcons very well. The hefty favorite for the first position drafted by the Dirty Birds is a defensive lineman at minus 400. Is that the plan on draft night for the Falcons?
Well, look, everybody in Atlanta wants them to draft a defensive player, so you would think that's the case, but don't be surprised to see them go O-lineman. They have Caleb McGarry, who's in the last year of his deal. You have Jake Matthews, who's long in the tooth. They're going to need a right tackle to protect Michael Penix's blind side, and they may find it here in the first round.
I would keep an eye on Shamar Stewart, making his way up the draft board for that spot at 15. We continue to set the stage here on this Thursday, but not just any ordinary Thursday. It is draft day in the National Football League. Donnie and I will do a pick 6 starting in our next segment together, much to the delight of DRS. Tom Vecchio will join us later on to end out this third and final hour for the prop perspective on this Thursday, because the draft is happening, and maybe that's your main focus and your main priority, but we still have 3 NBA playoff games. We still got Stanley Cup playoff action on the ice, and we've got 9 MLB games on this Thursday as well. Plenty for TV Tom to dive into. Plenty of thoughts and bets coming your way here in this third and final hour.
Absolutely. Getting set up for the draft tonight where superstars will be made. But also understand this. Like, if you're looking at this saying, well, where's the juice for the draft? Like, we know draft pick 1, 2, and 3. Technically, you might think you do based on, let's just say, the overall odds at the FanDuel Sportsbook. But we're not that far removed, Ben, where it was, well, who are we going to pick first? Well, he's already under contract to that team 4 days ahead of the draft. Then 2 falls in line and 3 falls in line, where you didn't have any instance where it's like, oh, we don't know what's going to happen. You knew what was going to happen because they already signed the contracts, and signability was a big deal before they started slotting the players in their draft picks and how much money they can make. So we do have intrigue. I'm just waiting and holding out hope that this afternoon we get something that sends shockwaves on the Richter scale right through the NFL draft. That's what we need here. Picks are on the move. Players are on the move. What's going to happen? Let's see.
Again, the idea of trades is not happening this year, but it is happenstance often in the NFL draft cycle, either from years previous or in that specific year, to see trades prior to the draft. Even if we don't see any prior to 8 p.m. Eastern time tonight, when the Titans are on the clock with the first overall selection, we should see at least a few throughout draft night and the duration of 1 through 32. DRS, of course, a lot of trades and movement happens because of quarterbacks. You see teams trying to fly up the draft order to get their signal caller of the future. This not perceived as the greatest quarterback class here in 2025. One of the reasons we haven't seen those flurries of deals so far. But when we look at the presumed top 2 quarterbacks for the 2025 class, who's going to have a better rookie year? Who's going to have a better NFL career? We debate between Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders by first asking all of you in Fade the Public. At Sports Grid on Twitter, which quarterback will have a better NFL career? Donnie, Cam Ward is a minus 50,000 favorite to be the first overall pick. And in the last 36 hours or so, Shedeur Sanders is seeing his draft stock take a stumble, and he might end up late in the opening round at 21st overall, as the odds are indicating right now to the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's not quite the comparison of last year, Caleb Williams versus Jaden Daniels, 1 versus 2. But for most of this draft cycle, really since the end of the college football and NFL seasons respectively, we thought there were really 2 quarterbacks with a first-round grade who would go up neck and neck against each other. Of course, there is some difference now between where Ward is slotted and where Sanders is expected to go, but still, those 2 quarterbacks we have really compared throughout this draft process. Obviously, because of those distinctions, Cam Ward runs away with the Fade the Public poll. Nearly 84% of our public vote, DRS, on Twitter saying Cam Ward is set to have the better NFL career. I'm not so sure you could argue that type of assessment at this moment, but did you?
For me, I voted Cam Ward. I think he's going to be the better quarterback, but there's also, things that you can play into it where 84% of the votes coming in on Cam Ward, that's a little bit out of whack. That's like saying, okay, Shedeur is just going to be a complete bust, and Cam Ward's on his way to get a bust in Canton as a Hall of Fame member. Right. But understand this, too. Both of these quarterbacks coming from different environments where it was Cam Ward, nobody wanted me out of high school, let me fight my way all the way to Miami and becoming the number 1 overall pick, where I had to grind and fight everywhere I went. This isn't a knock against Shedeur Sanders, where the talent coming out of high school was certainly there. But the father was Dion, grooming him all along to be a great NFL slash quarterback slash athlete. Took him to Jackson State, then over to Colorado, and was always going to be planted in that position to succeed. And he has succeeded here. So for my money, I do think it's Cam Ward. I think he has a better arm and just the moxie that he showed at Miami, which, again, a joke about where, I didn't know much about Cam Ward watching him on the Pacific West Coast. Didn't get too many, visions of him. But him at Miami, he passes the test in everything. Cool, calm, collected, big throws and big moments, ran a great offense there, and certainly fighting his way to being the top overall draft. When it wasn't at the beginning of the season, he was going to be number 1, or even at the end of the season, people thought he'd be number 1. There was a lot of question marks. I just like everything about Cam, but again, Shedeur Sanders in no way, shape, or form should be only 16% of the vote today on which quarterback should have a better career, him or Cam Ward.
DRS, we have talked so much about Shedeur Sanders and his draft odds profile because of the singular and individual prospect that he is, and because how much those markets have moved around his draft stock. A top 5 pick? Probably not. A top 10 pick? Well, as of last week, it seemed like a surefire occurrence. Now we're debating if he's a first-round pick and maybe even outside of the top 20. We'll get back to Shedeur in just a second. But because of all the conversation around Sanders, we haven't spent a ton of time discussing Cam Ward and highlighting the prospect he is, going 1 of 1 in first overall. Again, we have referenced this a few times. Last year, Caleb Williams was a minus 100,000 favorite to be the first overall pick. That was probably the price on Caleb Williams the year prior after 2022's college football season and winning the Heisman Trophy before he had to return to USC based on eligibility and when he could declare for the NFL draft. He was the prince that was promised always at number one. Of course, Jaden Daniels ran away with Offensive Rookie of the Year. Trevor Lawrence was a surefire first overall pick out of Clemson for the Jacksonville Jaguars. We have seen incredibly strong favorites like Ward's Price on draft day at minus 50,000 to go first overall, but Cam Ward was not necessarily always that guy. As you alluded to, DRS, nearing the close of the college football season, Cam Ward wasn't the favorite to go first overall. Heck, even entering Combine Week just about 2 months ago, he was only a minus 120, minus 135 favorite to be that first overall pick. Now we just await official confirmation at minus 50,000. Cam Ward's story is a unique one. A 0-star recruit out of high school that started at the FCS level at Incarnate Word. Went from Incarnate Word to Pullman to play at Washington State. Transfers from Wazoo for his final year of college football at Miami. Is a first-team All-American, the first Hurricane ever to win ACC Player of the Year, the first Heisman finalist for Miami since the early 2000s, and you see it right there, 39 passing touchdowns of his 43 total, set Miami single-season records DRS for passing yards, more than 4,300, and passing touchdowns at 39. Cam Ward is going to get his coronation as the first overall pick tonight, incorrectly so.
And he should, right? And you see that the elevation, and also understand this. This could be interesting for quarterbacks down the line as well. Don't you remember last year where he was like, I'm going to the pros. Like, I'm not going back to college. Decided to put his name back in college, winds up at Miami. And instead of being like, ooh, he might be an intriguing prospect somewhere down the line to solidify himself as the number one overall draft pick. That's pretty cool.
The NFL Draft Pick 6 here on the early line. Up next. A 2025 NFL Draft Pick 6 live right here on this Thursday on the early line on Sports Grid. It is draft day in the shadows of Lambeau Field out in parking lot 3. The NFL Draft takes place on this Thursday night in Green Bay. Round 1 tonight. Rounds 2 and 3 tomorrow. Rounds 4 through 7 to close things out. Come your way on Saturday afternoon. By the way, let me just say, Sports Grid's draft special begins tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We have you completely covered for the entirety of tonight's opening round. It will be myself, Kevin Walsh, and Joe Lisi providing that odds analysis and the perspective on the prospects as we know it for the 2025 NFL Draft, and a second set that will feature a second crew of Mike Blewett and our Sports Grid NFL insider in Adam Kaplan. The NFL wrinkles to all of this, team needs, and how these prospects are going to fit into the plans for the futures of these franchises. All of that, DRS, starting at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time tonight here on Sports Grid.
It's a good one. Is Joe Lisi's sole job tonight on the desk to explain in the eyes of an LSU fan of how the draft breaks down and how other players played against LSU and how that should influence your picking them and where they should go in the draft? That's what I want to know. That's what I want to look forward to.
Basically, it's how does he view a prospect? Did that prospect either win him a lot of money during their college football careers, or did they lose him a wager? Because if so, that's kind of how he does his mocks and his main evaluation tool for the 2025 NFL Draft. Ours, DRS, a little bit different. We will go through our pick 6, a slightly different pick 6, of course, in terms of category. A team to watch, of course, maybe somebody that could be on the move or surprise us with a selection tonight. A sleeper, maybe for the opening round, or just to know later on throughout this draft, the team that will draft Shedeur Sanders. How many quarterbacks do we see in round number 1? A round 1 best bet in the position of Mr. Irrelevant. That ticket can be cashed on Saturday with the final pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. All right, DRS, begin your pick 6. The team to watch tonight in a draft order so far that has seen zero movement is which franchise?
The New York Giants. They're in position to do something really good if they have an ownership group, which I trust, and I don't. They have a general manager that you should trust, and I don't. They have a head coach that you trust, and I don't. But outside of that, things are looking up for the New York Giants. Why? Because they hold the number 3 draft pick tonight. This is a 3-player draft. Really, technically, it's probably a 2-player draft, but quarterbacks usually get removed from the equation. The 2 best players in this draft are Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter. The Giants will get one of those at number 3. But the question for me is, what did they do in the rest of the first round? They only have 1 draft pick in the first round. What else are they going to do? Do they trade back in to get a quarterback that they deem can be your franchise guy? And I don't care what quarterback it is, Ben. If they feel it's Milroe, if they feel it's Shook, if they feel it's Sanders, like on that timeline here, or even Jackson Dart, I think that would be intriguing because you didn't come away in the draft saying we had to force quarterback at 3 because we were dumb enough to win a football game at the end of the season. You might have actually lucked out by doing that by saying, all right, we really liked Cam Ward, and we probably would have taken him number 1 overall, but we don't have that luxury now. Let's get a generational player at 3, trade back into the first round, and get our quarterback of the future, and we win multiple ways on the draft. But as I just told you, Ben, I don't trust the coach, the general manager, or the owner to be smart enough to make the right decisions in order to do that. But the Giants tonight, certainly my team to watch on what they do.
Yeah. DRS, listen, I would agree with you. I'm not exactly sure the Giants are going to move out of that spot, but it would make a lot of logistical sense. You have already solidified your quarterback room, it would appear, for 2025. What do you need? Talent everywhere. And we gave New York so much flack, and honestly, correctly so, for winning that Week 17 game against a Colts team that was still in the hunt for the playoffs, even if it seemed unlikely as a touchdown underdog at home. Because had they not, they would have been drafting number 1 overall, and a very different story for the Giants in 2025, perhaps Joe Shane and Brian Daboll. Now drafting 3rd overall, DRS, and still having a chance at a quarterback, and yet deciding more than likely not to go that way is intriguing. Minus 3,500 is the price on Abdul Carter to be the 3rd overall pick. But as Donnie highlighted, is he a prospect talented enough to move the market, to have somebody trade up the draft board? I would say so. We'll see if it happens. DRS, it does seem the top 5, at least from the odds perspective, is rather solidified. And if you ask me right here, right now, what would I say that exact order is? Cam Ward 1, Travis Hunter 2, Abdul Carter 3, Will Campbell 4, Ashton Jeanty now 5. It's a minus 165 price on the FanDuel Sportsbook. I'd say, yeah, that's likely and worth a bet. But I do really think Jacksonville is intriguing. The Jags don't desperately need a running back in Ashton Jeanty. Is that the smartest move for rookie head coach Liam Cohen and rookie GM, whose name I am forgetting right now in Jacksonville, young guy, James something? Is that the smartest move for this new era of Jaguars football? To pair Jeanty alongside Trevor Lawrence, is that going to make the biggest difference for this Jags organization? I would say no, although I believe Ashton Jeanty is talented enough. But really the question becomes, DRS, is Ashton Jeanty a guy that teams are willing to trade up for by a spot, a few spots, even into the top 5? I would say maybe, just maybe right now. And I do think Jacksonville is that wild card with the 5th overall pick tonight.
Yeah, no, and you're right about it. They sit right in that prime position. Like the number 4 spot, I do think is intriguing as well with New England, but also putting out the smoke screen. We talked about Shedeur Sanders earlier, saying, well, the Steelers probably want him at 21. If you want Shedeur Sanders, you probably got to jump to Pittsburgh Steelers based on the smoke screens. The same thing with the Jacksonville Jaguars. If they're putting out feelers like, we really like Ashton Jeanty here, you better trade up ahead of them or trade with them to get that said player. So I think it's a pretty good pick as we're going higher up in the draft. Me, the number 3 pick, same sort of situation, but looking at it saying we're going to get a great player, and then can we trade back up? And you looking at it as maybe the pivot point in the draft where the first major deal goes down in order to get that running back, which we think is going to land in Jacksonville.
And again, if it's Ashton Jeanty at minus 230, for him to cash that ticket as the 5th overall pick,
fans will love that.
Doesn't have to be the Jags making that selection. The rest of our NFL Draft Pick 6, it continues up next, live right here on the Early Line. Our 2025 NFL Draft Pick 6 continues here on this Thursday on TEL. A team to watch, either for the decision they make or maybe trading out of their original draft position. Donnie highlighted the Giants. I highlighted the Jags. Now let's talk a sleeper, either for night number 1 or day 2, or perhaps the entirety of the draft, at least a prospect, DRS, that we want to highlight that should be on everybody's radar when he steps into the National Football League? Who is that guy for you?
Let me read you the statistics last year. 117 receptions, 1,555 yards, and 10 touchdowns. In a meaningless bowl game, which was not meaningless to this gentleman who was trying to shatter records, 17 catches, 213 yards, and a touchdown in that game. This player, Harold Fannin Jr. of the Bowling Green Falcons. He is a tight end. He is an exciting tight end, and also one of those uncovered gems where you didn't see him on your TV screen every week. You only got to see him in action on a Tuesday and a Wednesday night in November. But this guy puts up statistics, 6'4", 230, and where was he born, Ben? Canton, Ohio? Is it just scripted perfectly where life begins in Canton and memorialized with a bust in Canton when it's all said and done? This kid can pick up those feet and put them down and run people over and out-jump people. I like my guy, Harold Fannin Jr., tight end, a player to watch in this draft.
Yep, no doubt about it, DRS. I think Harold Fannin Jr. deserves a lot more credit than we will see. He is not going to be a first-round pick, more than likely, but it's a really good tight end class. It's also a really good running back class. It might not be the greatest QB class we have ever seen, but I do think there's a chance we see 3 tight ends drafted in the first round, led by Tyler Warren, Michigan's Colston Loveland, and Mason Taylor, son of Jason, out of LSU. But whoever gets Harold Fannin Jr., either on day 2 or day 3, rounds 2 through 7, I think has a gem. Seen more as a pass catcher, maybe not the best inline blocker you have ever seen. I think the guy's a dog and is going to have a very successful NFL career. FBS record for the most receiving yards in a single season by a tight end, 1,555 this past year for the Falcons. Blockbuster type of player in my estimation. My sleeper, DRS, is maybe the best interior D lineman out of Michigan tonight, and it's not Mason Graham who I am discussing. I think Kenneth Grant is going to be an instant impact type of player as soon as he enters the National Football League. Now, Donnie, I live in New York State, as you well know. If I was in New Jersey, a bet I would have made last week, even around a minus 215 price, would have been Kenneth Grant to be a first-round pick. Sometimes when you don't live in a state you can bet the NFL draft, you lose numbers. Kenneth Grant is now minus 480 to be a first-round selection. Mason Graham is probably the first Michigan player to be drafted tonight, but I do think we will see 4 players from the maize and blue go in tonight's opening round. Mason Graham, Colston Loveland, the tight end, Will Johnson, the corner, and then keep an eye on the game wrecker and havoc bringer that is Kenneth Grant. I think he is going to be a sensational first-round selection for somebody later on in tonight's opening round. If you could give me a top 20 price, I would probably sprinkle on Kenneth Grant, but our only available odds, top 5, top 10, first round. If he does have a draft position prop open up later this afternoon, I'll probably lean the under.
Yeah, we'll see where some of these tight ends go, too. Talking about Loveland as well from Michigan, and also Fannin as well, going a little bit later. But the Philadelphia Eagles at 32, last year of a contract for one of their better tight end prospects that they drafted a few years ago in Dallas Goedert, could be up in the air as well. So a lot of fun, a lot of intrigue, and also a lot of high risers that might surprise tonight for us as well. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And DRS, what was really interesting about Mason Graham yesterday, had a minus 12,000 price during the afternoon to be a top 10 selection, and yet did not have one of the 2 best prices at any of the spots 6 through 10.
Can't figure him out.
Ashton Genty became that favorite to go 5th overall. Now Mason Graham is the favorite at plus 170 to go 8th to the Carolina Panthers, who I think are investing in one form or another along that D line. Mason Graham, Jalen Walker out of Georgia, or maybe Michael Williams. DRS, we've got 30 seconds left here in this segment. Then in our following segment, we will finish out the pick 6 with a lot of focus on the quarterback spot, including the team to draft Shedeur Sanders and how many QBs we see in tonight's opening round. All of that and plenty more draft discussions coming your way as we round out the pick 6 up next, live right here on the Early Line on Sports. One of the main storylines for tonight, and perhaps the biggest question of the opening round of the 2025 NFL Draft, where is Shedeur Sanders going? We'll try to tell you here on the early line. We round out our NFL Draft Pick 6 in 2025. DRS, which team, which NFL franchise is drafting Shedeur Sanders?
I'm picking the Giants, again, as my watch team because I do think they need a quarterback of the future. I don't think the Giants can come away with a project quarterback, which, again, if you're looking at the first round, and there's a couple names that are popping up, we're not talking about any one of those guys as like a project quarterback. You're talking about those quarterbacks, let's just say the handful of the first 4 or 5. They can be starting quarterbacks and franchise guys possibly if things work out. Not like the Giants take a 6th-round flyer on a quarterback that nobody ever heard of. Like, okay, we grabbed a quarterback and got him. That's why I talk about the Giants, because also when you're looking at, like, how do you sell an ownership group? And we're just talking about the Mara family at this point on you coming back. It's drafting a quarterback and saying, I can groom this guy into being a starting quarterback and we can win a lot of football games, which does buy you time in the NFL. Now, the conspiracy theories that Kevin and I talk about on Moneyline, which Kevin had a great one, where teams don't want to draft Shedeur Sanders because they feel if they draft him and he plays okay or doesn't play the first year, that the ownership group's going to fire the general manager and the coach and hire Deion Sanders, and he comes in to take their job. You would have to think that head coaches here, like Mike Tomlin, do you think Mike Tomlin's thinking about that for the Steelers? Like, man, if I get, Deion's kid this year and we win one more game than we lose, I might get fired and in comes Deion. Like, no. But the Giants, it's kind of funny that conspiracy theory would have legs. Like, they got to protect their own, which they've been doing for the past couple years. But again, making the smart decision for a franchise, you do have to start the quarterback sooner than later, even if you have a Russell Wilson and or a Winston at this point. But I just think the Giants getting a quarterback makes a lot of sense. And I don't think it's the smoke screens out where, hey, you know what? We don't like Shedeur, but we love Jackson Dart. A team shouldn't be releasing that type of information through their scouts or head coach before the draft starts, or putting it out there as an absolute smokescreen is a smarter move.
So, DRS, let me ask you, if the Giants do end up selecting Shedeur Sanders, where do you think that is? Not 3rd overall, I would presume.
I don't think so, but hear me out on this. Because I don't know if you want to, if Shedeur is your guy, you probably would just take him at 3. But there's a little bit of question marks there, which brings me to my next equation. If the Steelers stay at 21 and don't draft Shedeur Sanders, I would think the Giants would have enough capital and make it make sense financially to move up into the mid-20s, where it's not going to cost you nearly as much as 12, 13, 14, or 15. I do think that's a big price point, because if you want to jump ahead of the Steelers, which then the Steelers would know they have to jump ahead, it's like, we got our number 3 overall pick. Yes, we wanted a quarterback, but if you were that sold where you're jumping up using future ones, you should have just got the kid at 3 and said, we'll deal with it later at that point, right? So that's what I look at, where Sanders to the Giants makes sense if he gets into the 20s.
If Shedeur Sanders is not picked by Pittsburgh at 21 overall, there is a really good chance that despite being a minus 480 favorite now to be a first-round selection, he ends up going round 2, because there are not many teams following the Saints at 9, really 10 through 20, and then the Steelers at 21, and then 22 through 32 that would even look at a quarterback with the investment of a first-round pick. Maybe some future eyes, but with a first-round pick, that remains to be seen. The Giants have the 2nd pick of the 2nd round at 34th overall. The Browns have the 1st pick of round 2 tomorrow night on a Friday, 33rd overall. DRS, I have told you oftentimes, the team that I have always thought would draft Shedeur Sanders would be the Pittsburgh Steelers. To me, it just made the most sense for a variety of aspects. Now I think the Steelers don't even have to move off that number 21 overall selection and get their quarterback for the future. For Pittsburgh, it would be the 3rd time in this millennium they have drafted a quarterback in round 1. Ben Roethlisberger in 2004 at 11th overall. Kenny Pickett at 20th overall in 2022. Shedeur Sanders maybe at 21st overall here in 2025. I bet the Steelers at a plus 900 price to be the team to draft Shedeur. Now close to a month ago when I was out in New Jersey. I hope by the time I get to New Jersey later for our Sports Grid draft special, that ticket is cashed. It's now minus 135 for Pittsburgh to be the team to draft Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, no, it makes some sense. And look, the eyes are pointing that direction. He's going to go in the first round because, again, quarterbacks get overdrafted. We'll take a look in just a few moments how many quarterbacks we think go in the first round. But, I would be surprised if he makes it into the mid-20s, which then puts a lot of other teams on the clock saying, if we liked him a little bit, boy, we got value. We don't have to trade into the top 5 to get him. We just have to trade back into the first round. Much more manageable position. I can't imagine he slips out of the 20s there, but if he does, that's why I talk about the Giants. But the Steelers, wouldn't that be perfect? I don't think they traded up for Ben Roethlisberger, and he turned out to be a great pick, even after a couple quarterbacks were already taken before him. Same thing here with Shedeur Sanders. If Pittsburgh gets Shedeur at 21, doesn't use any capital, and feels like they have their franchise guy, that's a big-time home run, specifically if he turns out to be a Pro Bowl caliber player.
That was, of course, the Eli Manning and Phillip Rivers draft, where Manning was drafted first by the Chargers, traded for Phillip Rivers, who was drafted by the Giants. And, of course, as you know, the rest is history. Big Ben there at 11th overall. All right, DRS. I do believe we see 2 quarterbacks in round number 1, but I want to know what you think. How many QBs do we see tonight in the opening round?
If I say Cam Ward's going number 1 overall, which he will be, and I know Shedeur Sanders go in the first round, somebody's going to reach, because we're not also taking a look at the Lamar Jackson move where, hey, trade back into the first round, last pick, because we think he's going to be a good quarterback, but maybe need an extra year to really make sure. Lamar was great right off the bat, which worked out in spades. What a great move for the Baltimore Ravens. Now, understand this. If Shedeur Sanders does go 21, that means we have roughly 10, just over 10 picks, where other teams that need quarterbacks understand it's very important to take that quarterback in the first round and the second round, because the extra year that you can hold that quarterback under your own exchange, like the arbitration years in baseball, we have them for a couple more years. You get the extra 5th year as opposed to the 4 years. That's why I believe it. So if your pick comes true and Shedeur goes 21 to the Pittsburgh Steelers, my goodness, there has to be another quarterback that goes before the end of the first round. Because if we're hearing all this smoke on players that they think might be good, trust me right now, taking that quarterback 36 is stupid. Spend the extra capital to get him in the first round so you have the extra year to hold on to him so you can develop that said quarterback.
It's just a matter if you can find a trade partner. So, DRS, that brings us to Jackson Dart, who is a minus 350 favorite to be a first-round pick. Dart's draft position prop is 25.5, that tail portion of tonight's opening round. When you look at Dart, the team that is favored to draft the Ole Miss signal caller is the New York Giants at minus 120. Of course, that's not going to be 3rd overall, but again, it's the idea of the Giants, who have the 2nd pick of the 2nd round, trying to trade back into the late portion of the 1st round to go get Jackson Dart. I'm just not so sure it happens. I'll take the plus money to the under of the 2.5 for the number of quarterbacks in the first round. I think we only see 2 QBs at plus 125. DRS, your round 1 best bet is what?
Round 1 best bet, and usually it's like, hey, let me take a minus 200 to make sure it gets to the window. Look at all this Giants talk this morning for me. Donnie hates the Giants. Well, Donnie doesn't necessarily like the Giants, but he does like money and fun angles to play on the Giants, like taking a team total to the over, which again includes a 5-1 price that Shedeur ends up with the New York Giants in the first round. And again, it is a long shot because they would have to make a trade. They don't have hey, we have pick number 3 and 28 out there. No, you don't. You have to trade into it. I just think there's smoke where the Giants are telling us they love another quarterback. Man, you can't let that get out there, right? Like the Pittsburgh Steelers probably said, whoa, who said we like Shedeur Sanders at this point at 21? You got to keep that smoke light, which I do think there's something about Shedeur in the Big Apple can be a lightning rod, and I think the Giants would like that.
DRS, it feels right now your best bets are either hefty minus money or a big plus money sprinkle, so it's not crazy to see those odds. I have 2. The team to draft Omarion Hampton, the Denver Broncos, at minus 110, and Emeka Egbuka going under 26.5 for his draft position prop.